Have you ever really thought about this? How your body knows what time it is without ever looking at a clock? Not guessing, but accurately, waking you just before your alarm, even when you forgot to set it, making you feel strangely alert at certain hours and heavy at others, even when your schedule says you should feel the opposite. There are days you wake up naturally, no noise, no interruption, and for a brief moment, everything feels right, clear, like you've stepped into something you didn't realize you were missing. And then the alarm goes off, or the phone lights up, or the routine begins, and it disappears. But that moment, that feeling, wasn't random. That was you, in time. Not time as numbers, not time as something you check, but time as something you're part of. Before clocks, calendars, or schedules, you didn't need to be told what time it was. You felt it. Your body moved with it. And the strange thing is, it still does. You've just been taught not to listen. Your body already knows. There's something happening inside you right now, whether you're aware of it or not. Your body is keeping time, not metaphorically, literally. Deep in the brain, a small cluster of cells responds to light. Not thoughts, not decisions, light. The moment it reaches your eyes, even before you fully wake, a signal is sent, and your body begins to prepare. Hormones shift. Cortisol rises gently to bring you into wakefulness. Not stress, but alertness, awareness, the beginning of the day. And as the light fades later on, another process begins. Melatonin starts to rise, your body slows. Temperature drops slightly. Systems begin to turn inward. Rest isn't something you decide to do. But it isn't new. It didn't come from science. Science just gave it a label. This has always been there, long before we had words for it, long before we had devices that could measure it. And here's the important part. It doesn't run on your schedule. It runs on light, on darkness, on cues from the world around you. So when you wake up in darkness and stay under artificial light all day, and keep going long after the sun has gone, your body doesn't adjust instantly. It tries. It adapts as best it can. But it's still listening for signals that aren't there. And that's why sometimes you feel tired when you shouldn't, awake when you shouldn't, off without knowing why. Because something inside you is still moving with a rhythm that the world around you stopped following, what we used to live by. There was a time when humans didn't organize their lives around hours. They organized them around light. Morning wasn't a number, it was a feeling. The moment the sky began to change before the sun even appeared. That soft blue shift, that quiet lifting of darkness. People would wake into it, not abruptly, but gradually. There was no need to force the body awake. It was already moving in that direction. Work began when there was enough light to see clearly. Not earlier, not later. Just when it made sense. Food wasn't eaten because it was lunchtime. It was eaten when it was available, when it was ready, when it was needed. In many early societies, agricultural communities, tribal groups, life followed patterns that repeated naturally. Planting when the soil warmed, harvesting when crops were ready, resting more in winter, moving more in summer. Firelight in the evening created a soft, contained glow. Nothing like the bright, constant light we live under now. And because of that, evenings slowed, conversations softened. Bodies prepared for rest without needing to be told. Above all of this, there was awareness. Not of time as something to manage, but time as something to notice. The position of the sun in the sky, the length of shadows, the temperature in the air, the behavior of animals. These weren't observations for curiosity. They were information, guidance. And it wasn't complicated, it was intuitive, because people weren't separated from the environment they lived in. They were part of it. Nature still lives this way. If you step outside and really look, you'll notice something quietly remarkable. Everything is moving in time, and none of it is checking a clock. Trees don't decide when to bloom. They respond. There's a process called photoperiodism, where plants detect the length of daylight, not consciously, but chemically. As days begin to lengthen, signals within the plant begin to change. Hormones shift, growth begins, buds form. Not because it's March or April, but because the conditions are right. Because the rhythm has shifted. Animals do the same. Birds don't migrate because a date arrives. They respond to changes in light, temperature, and magnetic fields in the earth. Some species can literally sense the planet itself, navigating thousands of miles without ever having been taught how. Fish return to the same waters they were born in. Insects emerge at precise times of year. Even fungi, growing unseen beneath the surface, appear exactly when the environment supports them. There's no confusion, no hesitation, no questioning, because nothing in nature is trying to override the rhythm. It's responding to it. And every year, almost perfectly, everything happens when it's supposed to. The calendar problem, and then there's us. We celebrate the start of a new year in the middle of winter. January the 1st, a date, a number. A reset that exists only because we decided it does. But if you step outside at that time of year, nothing is beginning. The ground is still, trees are bare, energy is low. Nature isn't starting again, it's resting. The real beginning comes later, when the air softens, when the first green returns, when buds appear on branches that looked lifeless just weeks before. That's when something shifts. That's when expansion begins. That's when life starts to move outward again. That's nature's new year. Not announced, not counted down, just happening. And this isn't about whether calendars are useful. They are. They help organize, coordinate, structure. But the problem isn't the calendar itself. It's when we begin to live only by that. And stop paying attention to everything else. Because the calendar doesn't adjust for light. It doesn't respond to the season in real time. It doesn't feel. It just counts. And when your life is built around something that doesn't move, you slowly lose connection to what does. You're living by the wrong clock, and your body knows it. What changed? It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a moment where humanity suddenly decided to disconnect from nature. It was slower than that. Gradual, practical at first. We began to build systems, to organize life more efficiently. Agriculture became structured. Communities grew, trade expanded, and then something shifted even further. Time became standardized. Not just observed, but controlled. The introduction of mechanical clocks changed everything. For the first time, time wasn't something you felt. It was something you followed. Hours became fixed. Work became scheduled. Days became divided into equal parts, regardless of season, regardless of light, regardless of the body. And then came artificial light. At first, fire, then oil lamps, then electricity. And suddenly, darkness wasn't necessary anymore. Night didn't mean rest. It became an extension of the day. Work could continue. Activity could continue. Stimulation could continue. And from that point on, the rhythm began to blur. The Industrial Revolution accelerated it even more. Factories didn't run on sunrise and sunset. They ran on shifts, early shifts, late shifts, night shifts. Time zones were created to coordinate systems across distance. Efficiency improved, productivity increased, but something else quietly happened at the same time. We moved further away from the signals our bodies were designed to follow. Not intentionally, just as a byproduct. And over time, what was once natural became something we had to relearn. The cost. And this is where it becomes personal, because this isn't just about history. It's about how it feels to be you. There are moments where you're tired, but your mind won't switch off. Moments where you're awake, but not clear. Days where you feel like you're moving, but not really present. And it's easy to assume it's just part of life now, that this is normal. But if you look a little closer, you start to notice patterns. Feeling more awake when you're outside, even if you slept less. Feeling heavier after spending hours under artificial light. But because something hasn't shifted yet, your body's still waiting for a signal. Light fading, darkness settling, stillness arriving. But instead, there's brightness, noise, movement, and your system doesn't fully know what to do with that. So it stays slightly alert, not fully in rest, not fully in activity, just somewhere in between. And over time, that becomes your baseline. Not because it's natural, but because it's consistent. And the body will always adapt to what it's given, even if it's not what it was designed for, the deeper truth. And somewhere in all of this, there's a quiet realization that starts to form. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. Time didn't change. The sun still rises, still sets. Seasons still move through their cycles. Growth still follows the same patterns. Nothing out there lost its rhythm. We just stopped living in sync with it. We created a system that runs alongside nature, but not with it. And over time, we started trusting that system more than the signals we could feel, checking the time instead of noticing the light, following a schedule instead of listening to the body. And the strange part is, we've become so used to that slowing down feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, but discomfort doesn't always mean something is wrong. Sometimes, it just means something is different from what you've been used to. And in this case, what you've been used to isn't the original rhythm. TCM, yin and yang, the rhythm within everything. This idea isn't new. It's been understood for thousands of years, in different ways, across different cultures. In traditional Chinese medicine, the body isn't seen as separate from nature. It's seen as a reflection of it. Everything moves in cycles, yin and yang, not as opposites, but as parts of the same movement. Day and night, activity and rest, expansion and contraction. Even within a single day, there are natural phases. Times when the body is more outward, more active, more focused. And times when it turns inward, slows, restores. Each organ, each system has its own rhythm. Not controlled by a clock, but guided by flow. And this doesn't stop at the human body. It extends outward, to the earth, to the seasons, to the cycles of the moon, even down to the smallest level, atoms vibrating in constant motion, and up to the largest, the sun itself, moving in its own patterns. Everything, from the smallest to the largest, has a rhythm, not forced, not measured, just present. And when you begin to see it that way, you start to realize you were never separate from it. So what does that mean right now? Not in theory, not in a perfect world, but in your life as it is. It doesn't mean rejecting everything. It doesn't mean stepping away from modern life completely. It means remembering, in small ways, ways that don't demand anything from you, just awareness, stepping outside, early in the day, not for a reason, not to achieve anything, just to let light reach your eyes, letting your body receive a signal it recognizes, noticing when the sky begins to change in the evening, letting that be a cue, instead of pushing straight past it, allowing moments of quiet without filling them. Not every second needs something in it, letting darkness actually be dark, sometimes. Not completely, just a little more than before, and paying attention to how you feel. Not what the schedule says, not what the clock says, but what you feel. Because slowly, something begins to shift, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to notice. You feel more settled, more steady, less pushed, less pulled. And then, a thought begins to form, not as an idea, but as something you recognize. Maybe you were never meant to live by the clock. Maybe that feeling that something isn't quite right isn't confusion. It's awareness, because time was never something you were supposed to chase. It was something you were always meant to move with, and maybe nothing is missing. You've just been living slightly out of rhythm. As always, this has been Valkyrie. Thanks for stopping by. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others. Lanterns up, people.